Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Restoring Hope, the Crosswinds Counseling. I'm your host, Curtis Smith. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. And as always, a huge thanks to the community partners who make it possible for us to be here every week. Prime 47 downtown, Tesco, and Shepherd Community Center. The support of these wonderful and generous companies makes it possible for us to be with you every week on WHMB TV 40. As always, we have a great show for you tonight. We're going to spend 2 segments with our first guest, Dr. Chuck Dietzen. Dr. Dietzen is the founder of the Timmy Global Health organization. It's been helping people for about 25 years now, and we are pleased to have him with us. Chuck, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
You are doing incredible things all over the world. I want to focus on your medical career and how you've used that to help people in other parts of the country. First, tell us about your medical career. You've been a long-time prominent figure here in the Kokomo and Indianapolis area through medicine. Where do you practice? What's your area of specialty?
My area of specialty is pediatric rehab medicine, so rehabilitation of both physical and cognitive disabilities, and practiced for a number of years on the north side at St. Vincent, and then I was also the chief of pediatric rehab medicine at Riley Hospital for Children at IU Health. And ultimately, I now moved on to where I'm the medical director at Easter Seals Crossroads on Keystone Avenue, and went back to doing more of my global health work.
Yeah. What drew you to pediatrics? What is it about working with kids that fills your bucket?
You know, it's funny. I always joke that I was raised a Roman Catholic and then I became a roaming Catholic, but I wanted to be St. Francis. I was going to take care of the world, take care of the animals. And what happened was when I was 7, we started taking care of foster children. We had 150 foster children over the next 20 years.
Wow.
And my mother started saying, "Are you sure you're not supposed to be a pediatrician? You seem to have a way with the kids." And finally I got in, have a bachelor's in agriculture, withdrew from the vet school because it sunk in. And I love to tell moms that. It does sink in. That what she was saying to me all those years is true, that this is where I belong. And I was fearful of children, how would I take care of children who might not survive? And yet at the same time, there's a great synergy, a great energy in the room when I'm with the kids. And I pray for that. And I've had mothers say, "Are you aware of that energy in the room when you're with my child?" And I go, "Yes." So it's been a great relationship for the children and for me.
And you have some incredible stories of working with those kids over the years. Share a story or two of some of the remarkable things that you've seen helping and healing these children.
Well, it's always impressive just to watch how the children interact with each other and how supportive and loving and accepting that they are. One little boy that I took care of years ago, Jacob Lewis, passed away at the age of 9, and he'd had a massive hemorrhage in his brain, and it didn't look like he was going to survive, but he actually woke up in the intensive care unit at Riley Hospital and eventually went through rehab with me at our children's hospital, and lo and behold, told us that he met Jesus. He died, stepped over, met Jesus. Jesus hugged him and told him it wasn't time, and he came back. And it was just powerful to watch, to listen to that story, but also to watch how he interacted with others. And also just other children who, parents might be sullen or down, and we've had a child look up and go, "What's wrong? There's his guardian angel right there." And those are the types of things that say, pay attention to what the kids are telling us.
Wow, those are amazing stories. You took that passion of helping people, helping kids, and you formed Timmy Global Health 25 years ago. For those who don't know about your organization, tell us about it.
Well, in 1992, my first year of practice, I began doing global health. And my first interest was Russia because I knew this relationship we supposedly had with that country. But I went from there to Haiti, but 1997 was a very important time for me. I worked in India and worked with the Missionaries of Charity. I got to spend some time with Mother Teresa. And I was encouraged to start a foundation or an organization that would motivate our youth and move them in a way that they could change the world. And so that's what I did. In 1997, founded Timmy Global Health. So this year, March of this year, was 25 years of Timmy Global Health. And on September 5th this year, in 2022. That was started in 1997. 2022, now we're at 25 years of Timmy Global Health, and this will be the 25th anniversary of Mother Teresa's passing.
Wow.
So what
I can't believe it's been that long.
It has been. It's been that long.
Goodness.
Yeah.
And it's got a unique name, named
Yeah.
after a brother of yours who died in infancy, right?
That's correct. At the time I was asked to do this, I didn't want to put the family name on anything. I certainly don't want my name on something. But I did, it was faith motivated.
Yeah.
People said, why would you do this? And I said, well, this is why we're here. I mean, this is the purpose of our lives on this planet. And so I sat down with all the children's names from my pediatric hospice practice at the time, and I was looking at, could I create a name from the first letter in each of their names or something? And then I thought, that kind of like the idea of it being a child's name. And so I went to my parents and asked them, would it be okay if I named it after my oldest brother, who died a few days after he was born? And they thought that was a good idea. So,
And over these last 25 years, what has your organization been able to do? What has helping people looked like for Timmy Global Health?
The direct benefit to the populations locally and abroad is to deliver health care. Some of that in a public health sort of venture where you can teach them about how to take better care of themselves, but also doing some primary care clinics, and then also doing referrals on to the locations where they can get further care if necessary. So we do have outreach presently in Ecuador, Dominican Republic, Nigeria, and Guatemala. But I think just as important as that, having taken care of hundreds of thousands of lives now worldwide, we now have thousands of volunteers. We were at one point having 1,000 volunteers travel with us per year.
My goodness.
Of course, the pandemic kind of slowed
Yeah,
it,
right.
but that's what we want. We want to, as I tell the parents, we're just trying to nurture what you instill in your sons and daughters.
That's tremendous. Dr. Chuck Dietzen is with us and has agreed to join us for a second segment. So we are going to continue the conversation right after this break. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to Restoring Hope with Crosswinds Counseling. I'm Curtis Smith. We're continuing our conversation with Dr. Chuck Dietzen. Chuck, thanks for spending extra time with us tonight. We were talking about Timmy Global Health and the massive amount of volunteers, 1,000 a year that you got up to prior to the pandemic. What has doing this work looked like in and now kind of coming out of the pandemic?
Well, I think what we see is emphasis on the ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. That's something that's even more prevalent now. You take a population that's been moving about and having the freedom to go places, and I've seen this all over the planet. When you're essentially contracted and secluded, where you're not allowed to get out and travel as much, and to get out and exercise and do the things that you routinely did before the pandemic, I think that tends to increase the likelihood of the mental illness, the substance abuse, potential violence. In fact, some of us had a program locally where we were delivering food to some of the at-risk environments, and that was something we were trying to keep an eye open for, was who was struggling in terms of potential physical or emotional violence within the home.
On top of all that, you lead a fascinating life. You have dabbled in a lot of different areas. You're an author. Tell us about your book here. We've got a copy of it here. I'm holding it. Pint-Sized Profits.
Right.
Tell us about this book.
Well, the book was an effort. I love to tell the stories of the children. It always brings joy to my heart and a smile to my face, of course. But some businessmen who had traveled with Timmy through the Young Presidents Organization, they were the ones that kept pushing me to write a book. And I said, I really don't have the desire to write a book. I'll tell you the stories all day long. So I finally sat down, I just sort of dictated the stories, and then we fashioned it into a book.
Okay.
And the idea was to share these very important stories of my heroes, those children that I have such love and respect for. As I told many people, I'm very blessed to be the caregiver of my spiritual leaders. But in this case, it was to let other people know these stories, and also to have these kids long-term, that their stories are told. And so I often talked with the parents as we were going through some difficult things in the hospitals and in the other countries. May I tell the story of your child, and may I include their names? And they were happy to know that their child, through their struggles, would make the world better.
So far everything kind of makes sense. You're a renowned doctor working with kids. You wrote a book about working with kids and their incredible stories. Now we're going to take a little bit of a left turn here. Football and pro wrestling. Let's start with football. You have a couple of unique football experiences. You were the first ever quarterback at the University of Alabama, Birmingham. Tell me about
correct.
that.
That's correct. I've always enjoyed sports, and when my mother first started bringing up this idea that maybe I should be a pediatrician, I assumed I'd be a general pediatrician, but I also was working very hard. I was actually an amateur wrestler, and I was trying to be a state champion and a valedictorian so I could go to college. I knew my dad couldn't afford to send me to college. I'd be the first to go off to college. And so I took up wrestling, but I always loved football. I was just so small in high school, and then got bigger. And thankfully, I picked up rugby, played rugby at Purdue for a number of years, but I could always throw the ball pretty well. And finally, played semi-pro ball during the summers. But ironically enough, as I finished what we call the internship, first clinical year, I'm literally packing my bags to go to the University of Alabama, Birmingham, to do my specialty training in physical medicine rehabilitation. And the phone rings, and yes, it was one of those footballs that open up from Sports Illustrated.
Sports Illustrated football phone, right? I remember that.
and it's, hey, Doc, they want you over in London. And I was thinking, oh, this is funny. Where'd this come from? But yeah, the possibility to go play pro football in Europe. And I thought, throwing touchdowns is cool, but these kids, these children are the meaning of life. So I went on down to University of Alabama, Birmingham, 1988, and lo and behold, in 1989, they started their football team as a club team, and I tried out, and I was their starting quarterback. So,
wow.
And I looked up and said, thanks, got to do that.
What a great experience. Okay, a further stretch though, more of a reach here, pro wrestling. That's not what most people think of when they think of pediatrician, right?
Correct.
So tell us about your pro wrestling career. How did this happen? What does this look like? Do you have some sort of alter ego? Are you in a costume? Where do you wrestle? I have 1,000 questions now about wrestling.
Well, yes, it is quite the story. Actually, when I finished in Alabama, I moved to a underserved area in northeastern Kentucky, in Ashland, Kentucky, and I practiced there for 2.5 years. And when I first arrived there, they had a big newspaper article about all my sports background. And lo and behold, people were reading it, and they'd call and say, would you coach this, would you coach that? I ended up helping coach a high school wrestling team. And from there, one of the parents, one of the fathers, Don Belt, was a promoter for Eastern U.S. Championship Wrestling and World of Professional Wrestling. So he showed up in my office and said, would you wrestle professionally? And I said, sure. And so I was already practicing, but I just started training. And then, of course, we did the shows on Saturdays. And then I eventually came back to Indianapolis and Professional Wrestling International. We used to have that. We'd videotape on Friday nights and do the shows on weekends. So it didn't interfere with my practice. And eventually, when the kids found out about it, they thought it was so cool. They wanted to be a part. So we started the Timmy Takedown.
Oh my goodness.
So the kids, we leave the wheelchairs and the crutches and that sort of stuff outside the ring. They get in the ring and despite disability, show their abilities, and then somehow they win the belts.
That's awesome. I was going to say belt is a great last name for somebody who got you into wrestling.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So when was the last time you wrestled?
Oh, let's see. This would have been just this past fall, I think it was, in Carmel.
Wow.
And we have a big show coming up October 8th in Kirkland, Indiana.
Wow.
In fact, ironically enough, I just bought a pro wrestling ring we just put it together last week, and we'll be training up the kids a little before the show this year. But it's a lot of fun.
That's great. And do you have like an alter ego or a catchphrase or?
Yes, being a doctor, you've got all kinds of cool props.
Right.
And originally I was Dr. Death, and then Jack Kevorkian entered.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, I had a little boy call me out in front of my older patients. He said, "I know you, you're Dr. Death." So I immediately called the promoter. That's when I became Dr. Doom. I never lost a match, but from what I was told, that when they reviewed the videotapes, I was apparently injecting opponents with sleeping medicine.
Always a controversy in pro wrestling. Chuck, thanks so much for spending time with us. Just a fascinating life, and thank you especially for what you're doing for kids.
Well, thank you. It's been my pleasure to get to live this life.
Yeah. Wonderful time with Chuck Dietzen. Thank you so much, Chuck. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Restoring Hope with Crosswinds Counseling. In this week's Counseling Corner segment, Sean Reidenhauer covers one of the most common things we see in the counseling world, working through trauma and loss.
Hi, I'm Sean Reidenauer. I'm a therapist here at Crosswinds Counseling. I have my own history of trauma and loss. When I was a teen, I went through a lot of hard times. And over the years, I had some amazing counselors that walked alongside me and helped me overcome those things. And got me away from pursuing all of the bad kind of coping mechanisms that we tend to have. So I was trained in EMDR therapy. It's just a specialized treatment that's used by the US military. It's accepted by the World Health Organization. And it's just a kinder, gentler way to treat trauma. But not just trauma. If you have anxiety, panic attacks, or anger issues or whatever, it can help those kinds of things. I know it helped me a lot when I went through it as a client. So those are the types of things I'd love to work with you on if you're struggling with those kinds of issues.
Welcome back. Each week here on Restoring Hope, we bring you a word from one of our spiritual leaders at Crosswinds Counseling. Tonight, Chaplain Will Gross looks at the instruction manual God gives us, His holy word.
Hi, I'm Will Gross, a chaplain for Crosswinds. I don't know about you, but this nicer weather has me thinking about cooking outside. I was recently given a grill that I had the privilege of putting together. It was a harder task than I expected, and when I got to step number 23, I hit a wall. I couldn't figure out how to put it together anymore. The valve didn't fit the piece that was supposed to be there, and the piece that was supposed to be there didn't exist. What did I realize? I realized way back on step number 16, I had skipped half of the step. There were two parts that I didn't do. So what did I do? I had to undo my work, had to redo my work, and it was just harder. It was harder to complete the task because I didn't follow the instructions. Does that sound familiar? God gives us some instructions, some guidelines on how to live in His Word. And I can promise when we don't do things God's way, things just work out worse. I'm not here to promise you health and wealth by doing things God's way, but I can promise you that your life will be better. I'm also not saying that if you have not done things God's way, that your life is ruined and over. Absolutely not. My grill still works. And just like that, God can redeem the things in our lives that are not done according to His plan. But the question can be asked, what is God's plan? What are we supposed to do? Obviously, every decision is not mapped out in this book. But God does give us some really good indications on what to do. Let me read for you Micah chapter 6, verse 6 through 8. With what shall I come to the Lord and bow myself before God on high? Shall I come to Him with burnt offerings, with yearling calves? Does the Lord take delight in thousands of rams, in 10,000s of rivers of oil? Shall I present my firstborn for my rebellious acts, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He has told you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justice and love kindness and walk humbly with your God. God tells us what to do. He says to do justice, love kindness, walk humbly with Him. Those are the instructions. It doesn't mean we can't make mistakes, because we do. And God is willing to forgive when we ask. And that is the message of hope.
Thanks, Will. A wonderful reminder for us tonight. Here's another reminder. If you're a counselor or therapist, Crosswinds Counseling is hiring. We need great women and men to join the organization and to help us provide to the many people who need it. If you're interested in pursuing a career at Crosswinds, please visit crosswindscounseling.org/careers. We have opportunities here in Indianapolis and in Fort Wayne and soon Dayton, Ohio. Again, please check out crosswindscounseling.org/careers to see all of the job opportunities. As we wrap up tonight, thanks to all of you for joining us. It's great to have you with us, as always. Also, a big thanks again to our sponsors, Shepherd Community Center, Tesco, and Prime 47 Downtown, and of course to our friends here at WHMB TV 40. We'll see you next Thursday night at 9:30. Have a wonderful week. Stay safe and be blessed.